Welcome to all of you, all the viewers on the Google Meet and the viewers on YouTube. Welcoming all of you to this live session today. We are hearing today from Dr. Aniruddha Malpani. He's an angel investor and he'll be sharing his experience about how his journey about how an IVF specialist can also be an angel investor. And he will also share what exactly are the points that an entrepreneur should remember while pitching to an investor to understand the key. And we are hearing straight from the horse's mouth from sir himself, who's been on board of many companies and many startups, mentoring many young entrepreneurs.
Krishna, you sound very musical because this thing is breaking up all the time. So let's just skip with the formality. Should we just go ahead and start?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead. Yes.
Can everyone admire how good looking I am? Hey guys, say yes at least.
You look too good, Doc.
But that's not me. That's the reason it looks so good. And I don't look like this guy either. But I think this is what happens. A lot of people feel this is what investors look like, right? Fat cats, a lot of money, kisko paisa dena, nahi dena, fake sakte ho, stuff like that. And okay, TK, you have this great idea. This product is so expensive, it's so costly. We're such smart guys. We can definitely do a better job than the rest of the world. So why don't we go ahead? But you know what? We need a little bit of money to get this up and running. So let's go talk to this investor. And guess what the commonest response of an investor is? Which, trust me, can't be easy, especially when you're a hotshot doctor from a hotshot medical college or an engineer, and you're so used to coming first and you're so bright, and everyone says how intelligent you are and hardworking you are, and you just can't believe why will these idiots not give me money when they give money to stupid companies like Practo or whatever else who've not done anything. I'm sure I'll be able to do a much better job. So I'm going to break this presentation up into 3 parts. The first part is actually going to be why you should not approach an investor, which sounds a little ironic given the fact that I am an investor, but I'm going to spend a lot of time talking on bootstrapping. Then I'm going to talk about angel investing and what you can do if you want to raise money from me. And the final piece is about what medical students can do in order to change the future. The fun about doing a presentation in an auditorium is at least you can see people's faces and you can make out whether they're sleeping or not. And the trouble is here, I have no idea whether people are sleeping. How many of you guys have a pen and paper in your hand?
I do.
Okay, I'm glad someone.
I do.
Because honestly, if you're not taking notes, so we need to do this also, Krishna. We need to get everyone to take a snapshot of the notes they took and upload them. Fair enough?
Sure.
So at least if nothing else, make sure they're not sleeping.
Yes, sir, definitely.
But let's start. So again, the first thing I think is that investors are optional. And part of the problem is you read about the startup ecosystem and it seems the most important people are investors, and entrepreneurs aren't important at all. Because guess why? Everything you read, whether it's the press or Economic Times or all these various things like startup media and startup story and your story and stuff, they're basically full of articles which consist of press releases. And guess who sends the press releases? The VCs, because the VCs are the guys who have the money to pay for the press releases. But I actually think that's a broken model. Bootstrapping is far better. And it shows that you can actually do stuff. You can implement stuff. And quite frankly, if you don't have faith in yourself, in being able to do things yourself, why would you expect someone like me as an investor to have faith in your ability to do it? And then, of course, standard reason, how can we do it? We don't have any money. Everyone else has so much money. 50 different excuses, and that's the only word. And I think the reality is it's possible to do everything. And actually, you can do a lot of things far better if you have less money. Because if you have too much money, you tend to burn it. Easy come, easy go hai. Investor ka paisa hai, kya farak padta hai. Whereas if you have less money, you're likely to deploy it far more frugally, far more cleverly, and far more efficiently. Quite frankly, your customers are your best source of funding. And if you can get customers to pay for your product, trust me, investors will fall all over themselves to give you money. Then the question is, but how do we get these customers? How do they even know that our product exists? And I think that's where all the stuff about going back to basics is important. And I think this is a big problem. You always want to compare yourself with the big boys. But there was a reason why David managed to beat Goliath. And then rather than focus on what you don't have, why did he focus on everything that you do have? Because Goliath had lots of problems. He had all this heavy armor, heavy sword, heavy shield. So he couldn't really defend himself against David's slingshot. So David managed to convert what other people thought was a weakness, little small little guy, puny, no battle experience, no weapons at all, into an ability to actually kill the giant. And that's the way you need to think about yourself. And like I said before, you have to be much more creative. And trust me, if you spend your own money, you'll spend the investor's money far more sensibly, which is good for everyone. And your ability then to be able to create a sound business will be far better. It'll take you longer, there's no question. But you know what? There's no rush. This is not a 100-meter race. It's a marathon. This is something you want to be doing because you enjoy doing it for the rest of your life. So take your time. Lots of benefits. And I think the rules are really simple. Just keep it simple, honestly. Focus on just one thing. Do it well. Do it deep. So you know everything the rest will. Then think about going broad. You know, the moment you got an investor on your cap table, the one thing you'll want to know is मेरा पैसा कब आने वाला है? तुम मुझको exit कब देने वाले हो? अरे यार तुम अभी सिर्फ 10 widgets बेच रहे हो. Why aren't you doing 100 widgets? And then you no longer care about your customers because your priority is to keep your investor happy. Because guess what? You don't get a chance to talk too much to your customers, but your investor will want to make your life miserable. They will make sure that you keep on giving him monthly reports and find out what's happening. A simple thing, again, follow the Pareto rule, which is the 80-20 rule, because 80% of your money is going to come from 20% of your products. And conversely, 80% of your headaches are going to come from 20% of your customers. So you should know what to say no to. And honestly, I think frugality is actually becoming fashionable. It's cool. Whether you talk about the circular economy, where you recycle stuff, whether you talk about the shared or the rental economy, where you talk about mobility rather than owning a car. And I think that's why open source is so valuable, because honestly, the more you share, the more you give, the more you get. And that's why we're trying to encourage what we call tinkering. And that's why we have the equivalent of a maker lab, the M.I.C.E labs. People care about social impact, trust me. And investors these days care about the triple bottom line, planets, profits, people, so many things. And this way you can actually get your customers to co-create. And I always tell people, if you care about making an impact first, we are providing you with financial capital. But your human capital, the people who are willing to work for you and with you, will be so much more loyal. They won't go to someone else just because someone gives them a 10% increment in salary. And customers care about the fact that you're doing good. So you'll be able to take advantage of that social capital as well. And I think honestly, if you're in India, you have an unfair advantage. And people always complain, "Arey yaar, hamare paas paisa nahi hai." If I was in Silicon Valley, Y Combinator would have given me a $1 million check. All these investors like Dr. Malpani are so confused. They're not even willing to give 1 crore. But if you can sell in India, you can sell anywhere in the world, because Indian customers demand value for money. And honestly, what you need to do is start from a bottom up. And then you can always add bells and whistles and frills and charge more. It really doesn't matter. And the good news is you actually have access to the same technology which any other entrepreneur in the world has. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're in Silicon Valley or you're in India. Today you have access to the same servers, the same internet speeds, the same languages, the same hardware, everything else. You no longer have the excuse which people like me did 30 years ago when we would say, "Arey yaar, India is a poor country, hamare paas kuch nahi hai." No longer true anymore. Everything is digital and everything is online. You actually have a strength that running a startup is much less expensive. Office space is much less expensive. People are much less expensive. Take advantage of this. And often people don't understand what this word guerrilla marketing means. And here's a great example. This is an ad for a zoo. It's a moving ad. And what do? They just plastered this vinyl sheet, which looks like a snake, on a bus. And this bus travels all over the town. You know, imagine, it's a catchy ad and people are going to say, "Whoa." And then some kid is going to tell their mother, "Hey, mommy, can we go to the zoo this weekend? And daddy, please take us to the zoo." And what are they spending on it? Nothing. And then people will take photographs of this and upload to Instagram and 50 different things. So that's what you need to be clever about. And you know, honestly, if you raise money from an investor, you'll be very lazy and you'd say, yeah, we'll do Google AdWords. We'll do this, we'll do that. Same boring stuff which every other idiot does. Whereas when you don't have money, you're forced to be creative. And again, frugal doesn't mean miserly. But the point is that your first experiments have to be low cost, so you can bounce back if you make mistakes. But once you've done that and you're lean and agile, then it's okay to think big. Nothing wrong with that. But you have to earn the right to do this. And honestly, there's actually a frugal manifesto. So your starting point is still your cost. How do you keep it low? But the goal is what impact can you make and how much? And at the end of the day, you need technology, but that's just an enabling medium. You don't use technology just for the sake of doing technology. So it's like when you say health tech, the health comes first, the technology comes afterwards. Honestly, in today's world, we seem to have forgotten that. So it needs to be economically worthwhile, and please use stuff which is locally available and common sense stuff. Repurpose, which doesn't mean you copy and paste, and that there's a big difference. But there's a lot of open source available which you can adapt, and which can evolve, and you can upcycle. And again, the best thing is if you use open source stuff, please share back again with the world. Make it open source. Honestly, that's the best way of growing this ecosystem. And I'd strongly encourage you to read this book. So I think if you read this book, you'll start complaining about the lack of money. It's called A Beautiful Constraint. And honestly, constraints can be beautiful. And all the limitations you have are actually only here in your head. You can actually convert them to advantages. And again, frugal is not the same as Jugaad. And with Jugaad, you really don't have a choice. Because you can't afford anything, you're forced to do Jugaad. With frugality, you're saying, no, I want to do as much as possible with as little as possible. Jugaad are band-aid solutions, and we're talking about scaling that up. So frugal innovation is deliberately low cost. It's high quality. But the point is you're doing it so that it becomes sustainable and scalable. And this is what reverse innovation means. That we don't keep on copying from the West. And, oh yeah, there was an Uber in California, so we need to do an Ola in India. God. We're talking about a completely different market. And what does reverse innovation means? Is that we actually innovate in India and then export to the rest of the world. And honestly, frugal can be disruptive because you can do more for less. But you know what? Any entrepreneur sitting in San Francisco who gets funded by a Silicon Valley VC doesn't care about being frugal and doesn't even want to be. He's willing to burn cash, waste money on trying to do things faster. And he'll pay a price for that. And your approach needs to be completely different. And that's the advantage of it. Okay, so ultimately, you have big dreams. I completely understand that. And you want to do a lot. So how do you manage to eat this elephant? And the reality is one bite at a time. So you decide, okay, I'm bootstrapped enough. What do I do? How do I get money? Who do I get it from? So this is a fairly busy slide. But the point is that the people whom you can raise money from will change over time, depending on whether you just have an idea, or you've created a prototype, or whether you have a beta, or whether you've got revenue, or whether you've got profits. And in friends and family, if you can manage to get grants, but that can be quite time-consuming. You have accelerators and angels. And then if you're doing well, perhaps you can get VCs. And there are other options, including crowdfunding and banks. But I still think everything really starts from bootstrapping. And if you bootstrap well, all the rest of the stuff will fall into place. This again is a common problem. And I need to explain to people that it's hard for me to fund that. Most of your ideas are bad. And you won't even know how bad they are because the biggest problem with entrepreneurs is they want to hide their ideas. They want to say, oh, this is proprietary, I'm so clever, I'm so smart. No one else in the world has such a great idea. But honestly, the more the ideas you generate, the better your ideas will become. And the more you share them, the better, because we can help you polish your ideas and make them better. So you won't make stupid mistakes. Okay, how do you find investors? In the past, that used to be tricky. I think it's definitely become simpler now. I'm not saying it's easy, it's still hard work. And of course, there are lots of platforms like LinkedIn. You can, and cold email works very well because every investor will have a website and every investor wants deal flow. And what does a warm introduction mean? You get an introduction through someone else, and all that's relatively easy to do. All these are small world hypothesis where you know someone who knows someone else. But I think the magic sauce is different. I think the trick is to get people to come to you and not to go to them. And the best way to do it is to publish frequently all the time. You're the domain expert. You know much more about what you're doing than anyone else does. So show us how much you know. Share it with the world. Do a blog post every day or every week or whatever you want. And then someone will Google, say, okay, yes, I want to know about low-cost devices for transporting blood in a cool fashion without using thermocol, for example. And your post is going to come up. Say, oh, that sounds interesting. This woman knows what she's talking about. Why don't I contact her and ask her what she's doing? So that way investors come to you. And please remember one thing. People overestimate the value of a warm introduction. Arey yaar, if I was in IIT or IIM, the investor would give you money. Rubbish. Investors don't care about where you come from. We only care about where you're going to. And we care much more about your profit and loss statement than your diploma, your degree or certificate. And while a warm introduction will open the door, once you open the door, you still need to sell yourself. And remember, the purpose of the first contact is just permission to get a meeting. And that's why you need to spend a lot of time on sending the emails correctly, crafting the email, personalizing them, showing the guy that you've done your homework and you understand why he's the right person for you. Hey, how many of you guys are sleeping? Actually, that's a trick question. Because you're sleeping, you won't be able to answer, right? Everyone's sleeping.
We are wide awake.
Wow, that's
Awake.
okay. I'm glad.
Awake, sir.
Okay, no, kidding.
Awake, sir. Awake.
Okay. So again, please have realistic expectations. Don't expect that you send an email, you're going to get a reply in 24 hours as if we have nothing else to do. Investors are busy, we get flooded with pitches, and honestly, it's much easier for me to say no. People don't understand that. They don't. Investors need entrepreneurs as much as entrepreneurs need investors, because entrepreneurs can bootstrap. But how will investors fund entrepreneurs if entrepreneurs don't go to them? And honestly, we have enough headaches of our own. We have enough deal flow. We have enough existing startups which are running into difficulty with or without COVID, whom we need to manage. So, and then the moment you say yes, then you've taken on additional responsibilities. The first response is no. And honestly, sometimes we say no just to see how the entrepreneur will respond. And if he gets angry and upset and bullshit, you're an idiot, we're happy that we said no to him because he's obviously the wrong entrepreneur for us. And often it's the question, the way you interpret the no. And often the no means not yet, or perhaps you're not right, or whatever. You need to be patient, you need to be persistent. But please respect the fact that entrepreneurs need to be respected and investors need to be respected. It has to be mutual trust and respect. And this is something important. Lots of emails that I don't even need to bother to read the attachment, quite frankly. If an email comes to me saying, "Dear sir, please invest in me," I'm straight away not going to bother to open it. I'm going to delete it. A lot of people get very angry when I say things like that. You're such a useless guy. You think you're so important or what that you can't even bother to read an email when this poor guy has taken the time and trouble. But the reality is, if we send a "Dear Sir" email, he's mostly marked it to 100 other investors. And if he doesn't have enough respect to find out what my name is, or to customize it, or do a Google search and go to my website and find out whether I'm the right investor for him or not, then, the only thing of value I have in my life is my time and my reputation. The money will come and go, but I can't afford to waste my time on this stuff. And, when I tell people the truth, they get angry about it, which is honestly their problem. What are some of the other things which we would say no to straight away? Anyone who asks for an NDA. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. Hey, Dr. Malpani, please find a great idea we have. This is going to be the next unicorn. It's $1 billion idea. No one's ever had such an idea. But we need you to sign an NDA before we send you more information. Kindly go to hell. And let me explain. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement, but the reason I would not is because I get 100 ideas, most of which are already very similar to yours. And there's going to be just so much more paperwork for me to do if you're going to ask me to sign an NDA. So NDAs are valuable when you're sharing proprietary, important information. Trust me, a business pitch deck is not that. And if you do want to share a pitch deck and you're worried about sharing proprietary information, then create a pitch deck which doesn't have that proprietary information and share that. But please don't ask for NDAs. This is the other thing, people say valuation, I'm $1 billion company, or, I think my worth is $2 million. Why? Because I have 5 IIT founders and someone else had 1 IIT founder and he got $1 million, therefore I need 5 million. All kinds of rubbish. And they use a discounted cash flow. Now, discounted cash flow is just Excel gymnastics. You decide what your R is going to be. You decide what your terminal value is. You can make up any numbers. You can come up with any valuation. Completely unrealistic. Entrepreneurs who try to bluff. I mean, I may be an idiot. I'm an investor. I don't understand much about your domain, but that doesn't mean that you can take me for a ride. I've most probably heard a pitch from some other entrepreneur in exactly the same field. So I understand a little bit about your space, and I do my own homework. I do my own reading. So it's not like I trust everything you're going to say. And I hate people who refuse to accept criticism because they think they know everything. And sometimes we criticize just to see how you respond to that criticism and feedback. And if you can't take that well, then honestly, I don't even think we're the right people for you. Because trust me, you will make mistakes. And you need to be open-minded enough to have the maturity to accept them. And of course, we have all these wannabe entrepreneurs who have all these ideas and have had all these ideas for so many months and never done anything about it. And if you can't be bothered to implement on your own dime, please don't come to me. So red flag, someone who comes to me with only an idea, no implementation, honestly, I'm not interested. At least create a prototype. And in this day and age, if you don't have a website, I don't think you're serious, quite frankly. And everyone who shows a hockey stick curve, I mean, okay, show it, but I don't expect me to believe it. And I hope you have enough sense not to believe it. Anyone who says no competition has no clue what he's talking about. Either he's too lazy and he's not bothered to do his homework, or it's such a bad idea that no one wants to do it. Anyone who has no skin in the game, if you're not willing to put up your money where your mouth is, why do you expect me to win? People use buzzwords all the time. Sometimes it's blockchain, sometimes it's AI, sometimes it's ML. It's all fine, but be sensible about using it. Just because you've done a Coursera course on ML doesn't make you an ML expert. This is what we do when you come and pitch to us. That's basically, we need to find out exactly what you're doing and whether you know what you're talking about. And this is called due diligence. So what do we look at? Fairly basic common sense stuff. What is your market? You may have a great market, but you know what? It may not interest me. And if it doesn't, then you need to go find another investor. I can't possibly be right for everyone. Your business model, fancy words. I used to get very intimidated. I'm just a doctor. Mujhe kuch samajhta bhi nahi tha. But what is a model? It's just a way of creating value, delivering value, and extracting value. You create value in your business. You deliver value through marketing channels to your customers. And you extract some of that value for yourself. So you make a profit and you continue to grow. Not rocket science. And your team. And honestly, that's the most important thing. I mean, if you can't inspire other people to join you, then there's something wrong. If you can't inspire your friends to join you, you can't convince your family members to fund you, something's wrong. And the most important thing, quite frankly, is what progress you made, how much you manage to do for yourself. Funding, always a sticky issue, no easy answers. It's always a negotiation. Whatever you may say, some areas are hot, some are not. So ultimately, everything is open, so don't worry about that. Valuation is always a sticky issue. How much are you going to give me? And a lot of entrepreneurs are very worried. Arey yaar, ye investor sab meri company leke jayega, I'll take over control. Trust me, we have other things to do with our life. And we don't want to take over control of your company. We'd much rather you ran it for us so we could make money on what we call passive income. And our preferred option is what we call compulsory convertible preference shares. And we give this in tranches based on milestones. And the reason I'm deliberately using some jargon here is if you don't understand these words, you're not ready to raise funding. Please do your homework before going to an investor. Because if he talks to you and you don't understand what he's talking about, you look like a fool and he will not give you a second chance. Do your homework first. The good news is all this stuff is very easily available online. Of course, that's the starting point. Then you have to go to signing a term sheet, get a shareholder agreement, some simple things. Please find your own lawyer and find a startup-friendly lawyer. Most lawyers aren't. They don't understand this stuff. And just because it's your uncle doesn't mean he knows what he's talking about. And again, there will be areas of difference, but focus on areas of agreement. And there are lots of standard templates. And a lot of it won't make any sense because it's all jargon. And frankly, don't tell anyone this. But a lot of it doesn't make a lot of sense to me at all. So much of it is in fine print. But fortunately, I don't need to worry about it because my analyst does that. I think, again, this is important. What does splitting equity mean? Because when you start up, you own 100% of it. And by the time you're ready to exit, you'll have diluted and you'll given some to your co-founder, some to friends and families and angels and VCs and stuff like that. And in one sense, this slide is very misleading. And the reason it's misleading is ideally it should have shown that though your share progressively goes down, the slice of the pie may go down, but the entire size of the pie keeps on increasing, which means that 100% you had of a small pie, even if at the end of it becomes 17%, because that pie is going to be at least 100 times larger, you will end up earning a lot more. Whom do I fund? Everyone's paying attention now, right? How the hell do we get this guy to stop blabbing and just sign a check? Correct? Yes or no, guys?
Yes.
सब लोग फिर से सो गए.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So who do I fund? Again, the first thing is fall in love with the team, and everyone said, "What? You're not getting married to the team." But sometimes these are actually longer than most American marriages, at least. But kidding apart, a lot of it is non-financial reasons, and that's not true just for me as an angel investor. It's true for all angel investors. For me, I do it primarily as learning on investment. I'm not allergic to money. I'd be happy to have a return on investment, but I'm realistic enough to realize that most startups will fail. Nothing in the world is going to change that. And my point is, I should learn something. The three things we're looking for: integrity. Is this a guy whom I can trust? Curiosity. Is he willing to learn? Because there's lots he's going to have to learn. And is he humble enough to be willing to learn? Is he willing to teach me? Because that's part of the reason why I'm signing up. And for me, often the most important thing is, does he have paying customers? Because honestly, those paying customers have already done most of my due diligence, so it just makes my life much easier. Now, having said all these are our generic rules. We break our rules, we bend our rules, because I make the rules, so there's nothing which is written in stone. But you must understand that not all investors are the same. There is something called smart money versus dumb money. And of course, all investors think my money is smart. But trust me, I've been dumb in the past and I will continue remaining dumb for some people. But accept money from the right investor, because you get the wrong one, your life's going to be pretty miserable. So do your homework. The easiest way to do your homework is actually to talk to other founders whom the investor has given money to. How does he treat you? Does he treat you well, or does he make your life miserable? Please treat the money with respect. मेरा भी money पैसा कोई ऊपर से टपका नहीं है. I have also worked hard for it, and I expect you to treat it with that same degree of respect. And that's the way, honestly, I think of a funding relationship, that it literally is like a marriage. So what are some of my pearls of wisdom? That if the only investor cares about is how much return you can give, मेरा exit कब होने वाला है, you need to worry a little bit, because that's not in your control. The process is in your control, the outcome isn't. And if investors don't respect your time, that's a red flag. Again, the trick is get investors to come to you, don't keep on pushing them. And if they say no, that's fine, but at least ask them nicely, politely, okay, that's fine, but what can we do differently? What's likely to make you say yes rather than, and don't be too rigid. Don't be too flexible either. Don't bend over backwards just because someone gives you money. Learn to negotiate. And please remember one thing, just because you get a check and you get funding, that's no validation that you have a business. Just because I think you're bright and I gave you a check doesn't mean you have a business. And unfortunately, that's the whole problem with the entire startup press releases, that they only talk about valuations. They don't talk about the value the startup is creating for the customers. And this is important. Repeat paying satisfied customers. Paying is important. If someone does a free download, that's not my idea of a customer at all. That's just a user. And there's a big difference in a free user and a paid customer. Satisfied is important. And that's why I put in the word repeat. Satisfied means, is he willing to refer other people to you? And repeat is he willing to keep on coming back to you? Lots of vanity metrics. How many downloads, how much engagement, how many eyeballs. That's all rubbish. And if I say, no, look, please don't take it personally. I wish I had all the money in the world so I could sign checks for everyone who comes to me, but I don't. So it just may mean that you're too expensive for me or too early for me or whatever. It's not a personal rejection. But if nothing else, we also hope that our interaction with you will make you a little bit wiser. No's are not a personal rejection. So, and also don't compare yourself with unicorns, because you'll always do that, because that's what you read about all the time. But they're outliers. They're completely abnormal. So just like you don't expect to run a 100-meter Olympic race, like an Olympic runner, for example, it's exactly the same thing when you're raising money. And investors are always optional, never forget that. I think this is important. There's a big difference between angels and VCs, and people often get a little bit confused. VCs invest other people's money. And that's why they need to worry a lot, because they need to return that money back to them. VCs are run by what are called general partners. It's a company, it's a structure, very small, but they have an investment committee, they have analysts, and that's why decision making is done by the institution, and they have very strict guidelines. They have to. Angels, on the other hand, the only person I have to answer to is my wife. And now she's been married for me too long to divorce me just because I fund the wrong startup. And that's why angels come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, because we have different motivations. But you must find out, because everyone these days calls themselves an angel, but they've never signed a check in their life, or the last check they signed was 100 years ago, and or the check they signed was 1 lakh or some rubbish like that. So you must interview their founders. Honestly, there are lots of predators in the startup ecosystem. Don't let them take you for a ride. The truth is that most startups will fail, and that's fine if yours does. No one knows in advance which startup will fail. Even VCs like Matrix and Sequoia don't. If they were so smart, and you would expect, hey, these guys are billion-dollar companies who've been doing this for so many years. But the reality they don't is because startups are complex adaptive systems, and by definition, they're fragile, and we can't predict what's going to happen. It's a numbers game, which is why investors invest in a portfolio of startups. And often, things go up, but they usually go down. Most startups have been on the brink of failure before they finally bounce back. And companies need money all the time, and that's fine. So what are the risks? Be prepared for failure, not the end of the world. If nothing else, it will teach you to be resilient, trust me. And I think this is really important. Irrespective of whether you make money or not, and that's not something anyone can predict, let me tell you that. It can be a great journey. It will teach you a lot about yourself, your ability to lead people, your ability to sell, your ability to convince people. And it will teach you a lot about the world and what a complex place it is, and how many good guys there are, and equally how many bad guys there are. But the truth is, it's a lonely journey. Because if you had to worry, God, where am I going to pay the salary for next month for my employees from? You can't tell your employees that. It's not easy to convince your family, because obviously they want you to get a safe and secure job. अरे TCS से job मिल रहा है, महीने का 50,000 मिल रहा है, what's your problem? Entrepreneur बनेगा, कोई तेरे साथ शादी नहीं करेगा. And honestly, it's not easy. You need to find support, and other founders are the best source. Mentors and coaches are valuable, but there's a big difference. I hate the way people loosely use the word mentor. Everyone calls themselves a mentor. Anyone who charges a single naya paisa is not a mentor by definition. If you don't believe me, please look up what mentor means on Wikipedia and find out for yourself. So by definition, mentorship is free, and people do it for personal emotional reasons, because they want to give back. Consultants charge a fee, which is absolutely fine, and they're saying it up front, but at least they shouldn't call themselves mentor. And the same thing applies for coaches. And investors, again, are very different. Investors have skin in the game because they're actually giving you money. So lots of investors will also serve as mentors if that's what you want them to do. But no one can force a mentor-mentee relationship. Like I said, there are lots of so-called incubators and accelerators, but lots of parasites. And the trouble is that it's all the bad incubators and accelerators which advertise heavily and market themselves because they're looking for bakras, Yeah, we'll take away 10% of your equity and we'll give you falana, dikana, space, all rubbish. Stuff which you could easily get for free on a website anyway, as far as the informational content goes. And we'll open so many doors for you and to make all kinds of tall promises. And you don't care about giving away the equity because, अरे यार, मेरे equity में value ही क्या है? And then you realize what a big mistake you made. And honestly, if I see the names of some of these incubators and accelerators on your cap table, for me, that's a red flag. If you were such an idiot that you allowed them to cheat you, I'm not interested in investing in you. So the most important success for ingredient is to learn, and the most important thing is to learn to sell. And if you want to learn to sell, you need to tell stories. You need to tell stories all the time to family members, to convince them what you're doing is right, to your first hires, your co-founder, your employees, your investors, your customers. You need to lead a team. You need to get your hands dirty. And you need to be patient and persistent. And often the best way to learn all this is to work in a startup. And the great thing about working in a startup is you may or may not get a salary. Let me warn you right now. But the founder is so happy to find someone who's willing to take on responsibilities that he's happy to give you as much responsibility as you're willing to take on. Lots more information on our website called startupmentors.in. And again, if you fail, remember one thing, you will be able to start all over again. Before you approach an investor, please read this book. It will make you smarter than 99% of the other entrepreneurs. And honestly, reading this book is much cheaper than joining an incubator or an accelerator. And the book will tell you the truth, which most of these guys don't. And if you're a really frugal entrepreneur, then you'll get this book on SlideShare. It's called the Fundraising Field Guide, and the information is pretty much similar, but it's free. So really, if you don't read it, it's go bad. So finally, the third bit of my presentation, and I'm going to focus this time on the healthcare innovation piece. And there's no question healthcare is broken. Startups can make a big difference. And basically, we need startups to make healthcare available, accessible, affordable. And at some point, we hope this is the next generation of doctors. And there's so many clever innovations which have come up. For example, you can use a smartphone as a digital stethoscope. So there's no additional cost except the software. You get smartphone-based ECG monitors. Now, obviously, all these things have problems, but the fact is people have tried some of this stuff. And you can actually use a smartphone as a fundoscope, stuff you couldn't do now. Again, there are pros and cons. And you can actually put IoT, which is Internet of Things devices, within asthma inhalers to help asthmatics take better care of their disease. So you would say, hey, if healthcare innovation is so bright, then where are the healthcare success stories? Where are the Olas and the Flipkarts? Practo came up about nearly 10 years ago. It was richly funded, but nothing's really changed. The quality of medical care hasn't changed, either for patients or doctors. And part of the problem is a lot of healthcare startups fail. And often it's because they're started by techies, and techies just love solutions. They don't really care about anything else. Hey, I've got this clever algorithm I've come up with this clever dabba. So then they look for a problem to solve. And they often don't understand how a doctor thinks or the constraints which a doctor operates enough. They don't have enough understanding of what are called unmet clinical needs. And we're hoping that part of what you're going to be doing through this thing which M.I.C.E has helped organize for you is teach you how to be able to do this. And the biggest problem is they always say, "Arey yaar, all these doctors are dinosaurs, they're idiots. Inko kuch samajhta nahi hai, ladai se simple cheez bhi nahi kar sakte." But you know what? Doctors aren't idiots. We can manage robotic surgery. We know how to interpret an MRI scan. If you ever go into an ICU, you'll understand how much technology doctors handle all the day. So we don't want to use technology just for the sake of technology. We want it to help us take better care of patients. And if you can't do that, don't expect us to adopt your technology. And the reality is there's a lot of hype and harm because engineers fall in love with the newest shiny object. Hey, let's use this and let's use that. And doctors have burned their fingers in the past, trust me, so many times. Hey, this is the best thing and it doesn't work. And honestly, we think engineers don't understand anything about patients. And that's the reason why sometimes there's such a big gap and we're trying to bridge that. So let me tell you this little story about Google, the world's second richest. I think Apple is first with a $2 billion market cap, but Google is smart, and they came up and they spent $1 billion on smart contact lenses. So you know what they came up with? They said this is brilliant. Diabetics need their blood sugar monitored all the time, but diabetics hate having to keep on poking their blood sugar and checking with this thing. So why don't we do something simpler? Why don't we come up with this clever contact lens, which is a smart contact lens, which all this guy needs to do is put in his contact lenses, remain in the eye all the time, and he'll automatically get a reading 24/7 of his blood sugar levels are without having to poke himself, and the doctor will know how good his blood sugar level control is. Perfect idea. Spent $1 billion. And then realized it didn't work. And you know why it didn't work? Because they realized there is no sugar in the tears. And there isn't any sugar in the tears. You put the contact lens. What is the poor contact lens going to measure? But just imagine, they wasted so much money. So how can we help doctors become more innovative? And I'll let Krishna do the talking for most of this, but please go to the M.I.C.E website. And this is something we've been doing for 2 years. And really, this Krishna owns. And there's lots of stuff. We have a fairly decent process. We think hospitals are where innovations start from, not from the IITs or from the engineering colleges, because that's where the patients are, that's where the doctors are. And this way you can talk to senior doctors who will tell you what the problem is. You can go to an OPD, you can go to the OT, you can figure out what's happening. You can talk to nurses and understand, and nurses often understand much more than doctors do. And equally importantly, you can talk to patients and the caregivers as to what problems they encounter and what their solutions are. This can help you teach a lot. Innovation should start from the bedside, and that's what a hospital allows you to do. And senior doctors have a lot of clinical experience, but they can't think innovatively. But they understand the pain points of their patients, and you can form a great partnership with them so that the solutions they provide and which you implement are practical and feasible. And this is basically the BETIC model, what we call the 4Ds. First, define the unmet clinical needs. If you notice, there's no D for dream of a solution, okay? Your second is design the prototype, and that's all the tinkering and the 3D printing we do. And finally, once you have a prototype, you need to deliver it to the bedside, and only then can you deploy in the market. So, and all these things take a long time, 10 times longer than you think they will, because it's a complex process. Lots of things can go wrong. But the good thing is doctors think very differently from engineers. Doctors treat problem one step at a time, and we're very good at that. But I think to that extent, engineers are smarter because they want to fix as many problems as quickly as possible. But they like breaking things, and doctors don't like that at all. And that's why we want to bridge the gap. We're kind of saying if it's not broken, why fix it? And therefore, how can we do this as a partnership? And ultimately, this is what we want from you guys. This is the next generation of entrepreneurs. So now I have finished. I need to go back to my stop sharing, which of course I can never find. So shouldn't I have stopped sharing?
So
Yeah.
it has already stopped.
Oh, wow, it's even cleverer than I am. Google is a mind reader. Okay, guys, so can I start? We have another 10-15 minutes, is that right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Abhishek can
Someone
go
has
ahead.
to say yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so should I start answering some of the questions you put in the chat?
Yeah. Abhishek, can you just read it out for sir?
Been answered, so I'm not going to that. Is that fine?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sorry?
I'll just read out the ones which are not. You have answered most of the questions, sir. I'll just read out the ones which are yet to be answered.
Okay, fair enough. Sure.
So, yeah, so there was this one important question which was there since the last time we were session also. This question talks about that startups in the medical field take a lot of time to get from idea to prototype to product, and in that direction they are not able to really work on a business model. They have to work more on the IT part of it. It's on revenue those things. So what advice would you like to give them in order to achieve product market fit? So because since they will not be really businesses in the long term, they'll take some time to get there. So what advice would you give them to?
Sure, everyone takes time to get to their goal, but you need to know what your goal is, and therefore you need to plan. So we understand that the plans are flawed, but the planning is very valuable. And you need to follow the same principle. It's just that the difference is that for someone else it might take 3 years, and for you it might take 5 years. That doesn't really change anything. And you have to have that clarity of thought, because I need to be convinced that you know what you're doing. And again, when you talk about product market fit, you've got to work backwards. You've got to tell people, hey, this is a prototype, and you can create prototypes extremely inexpensively and extremely quickly. That's the whole point of having what we call a prototype. So no one's going to give you any brownie points or allow you to take shortcuts just because you're a healthcare startup and your intentions are the best in the world, okay? People will still expect you to deliver results. And in one sense, your responsibility is far more because you're actually people's lives are at stake.
Yes, sir. Because I think the risk is also that much appropriate. That's very true.
But I think in a way the good thing is that it requires a lot more courage, and therefore the competition is that much less, isn't it?
So this next question asks, you've seen a lot of progress in the K-12 sector where children are coming up with their innovation, stuff like that. So this question asks, how to remove the monotonicity in the medical education part, and what we can do to bring about innovations there in the medical education industry. So there is a lot of rote learning and those kind of things in the medical education.
Okay. I think so. Okay, so I'm assuming this question is being asked by a medical student slash resident who's got to be doing a lot of cramming. I think that's a tragedy, and no question about that. And to that extent, I feel sorry for you. But I think sometimes a lot of depends on what your goal is. I think part of the problem is if it's a rat race, and if your priority is to get a postgraduate seat, and therefore you need to be in the top 1%, then the amount of studying you need to do is just going to consume everything. Whereas if you're smart and you're going to say, hey, all I need to do is pass, because at the end of the day, I don't want to become a specialist or a super specialist. This is what I want to be. Then the amount of time you need to spend is going to be that much less. And I don't honestly think they're mutually exclusive. And it's possible to do both if you're clever about it, which means you obviously need to study for an exam. I'm not disputing that. But if your only goal is to get marks in an exam, the hack for that is only cram. And then you promptly forget everything because all you want to do is score marks, not to learn. And then the extra time which you generate, you can actually do for doing stuff which makes you excited and happy and, wants to make you get up in the morning. Honestly, the thing about being a medical student is you often find it difficult to go to sleep at night because, oh God, I've still got 100 pages left to read. Whereas if you become an innovator, you'll want to get up in the morning. Yeah, how am I going to fix this problem? And I think that's a lot more fun. Does that answer some of your question at least?
Yes, sir. It definitely does. In the perspective of a medical student, exactly. So this next question is a bit particular on the particular topic. This talks about needle stick injuries, and so this question mentions that healthcare workers do not report their needle stick injuries in fear. In fear of being shamed. So what steps as an individual and a hospital we could take, or the organization could take, to ensure the no blame and no shame culture around.
Yeah, very difficult. Because see, the moment you're talking about culture is implicit. And you're basically talking about group behavior. Changing your own behavior is so difficult. To change the behavior of a group of people is extremely hard. So I don't think there's any easy answers. So the right thing for questions like that, and the whole point is when these are generic questions, you should actually buy a book on Amazon and buy a book on changing culture, improving culture, changing this thing, and there are lots of them. And that will give you some idea. And really, whether you're trying to change culture in a hospital or in a startup or in a large corporate or in society, the principles remain the same, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with individuals and groups of individuals. So my bottom point is that any problem you encounter is a solved problem. Someone or the other has solved it. Maybe they've solved it in a different geography, in a different time frame, in a different domain. And if they've solved it, they've usually shared that. And then you need to think about what they did which worked, what they did which didn't work. Look for what are called the bright sparks or the positive deviants, and think about how you can adapt that for your particular individual circumstance. Okay, guys, we have an additional 10 minutes before Sandeep comes online, so we're still running on time.
Yes.
Any more?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So there's this one question in chat. So, hello, sir. I'd like to know, is there any threshold limit beyond which an entrepreneur should not liquidate his or her stake during early fundraising? So
Again, so that's why I had that slide on dilution. So you need to think about the future. And obviously, the more you give away upfront, the less you will have left for yourself. And that's why you need to be fairly conscious and careful about it. As a useful rule of thumb, we think when you're raising your first round, which is usually an angel round, don't give away more than 20%, which means the angel gets about 20% and you keep about 80%. Because you'll need to further dilute that 80% with the next round of investors. You'll need to create what's called an ESOP or an employee share option pool. You'll have to give some to your co-founders. But these are all very rough rules of thumb. So again, basic guidelines and then adapt them to your circumstances. Everything has pros and cons.
Thank you so much, sir. So this next question...
There's again a great website. It's called Slicing the Pie. Such a great name, right? You're effectively, there's the equity pie and you're slicing it and it tells you all about. So people ask the same questions. Co-founder ko kitna dena chahiye? शुरू किया तो co-founder था, अभी 1 साल के बाद वो शादी करके चले गया, लेकिन उसके पास अभी 30% equity है. What should I do with it? Should I take it back? How do I take it back? All kinds of things. And like I said, everyone's held these problems. So if you read the book, you'll have a better sense of exactly how to deal with some of these things.
That was so slicing the pie. I'll just mention that in the comments as well, so that others can look at it. So this next question asks your opinion on edtech startups in India, and the question is saying that most edtech startups these days are like old wine in new bottle kind of system. So
but hardly the way they're old wine in old bottles now, na? Bottle भी पुरानी हो गई है यार. वैसे bottle भी नहीं दिखती आजकल. हाँ, but anyway, go on.
So he's asking that even though they aren't disrupting anything significantly, then too their valuations are such high and such high figures. So he's I think trying to ask that question about the valuation part.
I don't understand anything about the valuation game. I don't play that game. I think it's highly irrational and it makes no sense to me. And if you allow yourself to get distracted by that game, then serves you right. Then you deserve to read all that rubbish which you get. How does it make any difference to you? Just because your boyfriend has a better looking wife than yours doesn't make your wife ugly, right? Right? He's not saying anything, so I need to worry. But guys, please stop comparing yourself with other people. What do you care what's happening in the rest of the world? That's a formula for unhappiness. Be contented, do what you think is right, and the rest of the world can go to hell. So sure, maybe he'll raise more money now. But you know what? After 2 years, maybe he'll crash and burn. Who knows? कल किसने देखा है?
Yes, sir. Very well answered.
What's your opinion on AR, VR? Of course, but please don't do AR, VR or MR or XR or whatever else just because it's a buzzword, okay? And always remember, just you can use buzzwords, everyone else can use buzzwords. And frankly, all these technological tools are commodities, whether it's an AI algorithm or an ML algorithm or this thing. So don't ever think that's going to be enough to differentiate. It'll allow you to do clever stuff, but you're going to do clever stuff which your customer finds a value and will pay. Some of the other questions, another 5 minutes, and then I'll hand over to Sandeep. Startups innovating in, sorry?
There is this one question, and actually even I would like to know
Sure.
more about it. So there's this one question, how to save time and stop dancing to pseudo investors. I would like to add that how do we recognize the red signs or those kind of things about a pseudo investor, this thing, a pseudo investor group.
Very okay. So some of it is very easy. So any investor who asks you for money for whatever reason, that's a straight away red flag. Okay. तो लोग बोलेंगे अरे यार तू पैसा दे फिर मैं तुझको सिक्वाया को इंट्रोड्यूस करूंगा. That's again all rubbish. No good investor will ever ask you for money. Any investor who doesn't respect your time, who keeps you dangling on, will invite you for a coffee and make you pay for the coffee. Trust me, those are all bad things. And the easiest way to do is anytime someone says, okay, fine. And all good investors will have websites where they will talk about whom they've already funded. And the trick is to then talk to the guys whom they've funded in the past. And if they haven't, then why do you want to be the guinea pig and why do you want to waste your time on that?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. That is very well answered. So I think we can have one more question from the audience and then we can wrap it up.
Can I ask one question, or maybe you guys can add to the chat? What could I have done to improve this?
Hello.
Hello. I think feedback is extremely important. And if you guys don't provide feedback, I'll never improve anything I do. So I'll continue deluding myself that I'm such a great speaker and there's so many people and I'm giving so much gyan to, and that's a dangerous thing to be. So honestly, and I much prefer criticism rather than compliments, because honestly, criticism is a gift. If you tell me what I'm doing wrong, share this thing, I'll be able to fix it and improve it. Not always, I'll do my best, but I honestly appreciate that. Because don't forget, the only reason to do all this is to help you guys, to provide a service which is useful. Now, we don't know whether it's useful or not unless you tell us. And, give us feedback. Say this was crappy, or so-and-so did this webinar and it was 50 times better because you guys, whatever it may be. We're always happy to learn.
I think Niladri has a question. Niladri, please go ahead.
Hello. Yes, sir. I wanted to ask that when I'm explaining a particular problem to somebody who's not a medico,
Sure.
how do I go about explaining it to them properly? Because there are a lot of things, things that I based on upon my experience inside the hospital, which I find
Can I
difficult
ask you a
to.
question? When you were in the fifth standard, how did your teacher explain anything to you? Because you didn't know anything when you were in the fifth standard, right? So the rule for teaching is exactly the same as it's always been. Start from where the person is, hold their hand, and then take them to where you want them to be. Your problem is you
Okay, sir.
have the curse of expert knowledge. You know so much about your particular little widget that you lost sight of the big picture. And you've got to empathize with that guy. You've got to start off by telling stories. So let's suppose you created an implant for, let's say, better knee joints or whatever. So say you remember the last time you sprained your knee. Or hey, do you remember, has anyone in your family had a knee joint replacement? Or something else. Something which start off with questions and stories. That's the best way. And sometimes you don't know what they don't know, what they do know. And you've got to engage them rather than give them a brain dump.
Question I posted it as well, but can I ask you verbally?
Okay, one last question. Last one. Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Doc, what's your opinion on psychological evaluation of a child for choosing a stream for him or her? Would you be willing to get it done if you were to choose for yours?
No.
Okay.
Because I'll tell you what, it's I think honestly it's a big sham right now. And there's so many of these career consultants in inverted commas who are happy to charge anyway literally from a session all the way to 50,000 rupees. And they have standard canned answers for everyone else. And
if it were for free.
Again, free is always complex because again, if you give it free, then people don't see value in it. And how are you customizing and what you're customizing? So I don't have a generic answer. So, and honestly, the reality is when you speak to a child when he's 15 years old and give him advice, the fact